The dojo was buzzing with energy as students in crisp uniforms stretched across the mats. The air smelled of sweat and determination, and the sound of shouts echoed with every practice strike. At the center stood the karate masters, their black belts tied firmly around their waists, their confidence as sharp as their movements. Into this space stepped a quiet woman dressed in plain clothes. She bowed politely and introduced herself with a soft voice barely above a whisper. The masters exchanged glances, smirking at her timid appearance. They assumed she was a beginner, someone who would quickly falter under their drills. One of the masters raised an eyebrow and spoke with a mocking tone. "Do you even know what discipline means?" he asked. The other fighters laughed quietly, their eyes fixed on her slight frame. But the woman remained calm, her gaze steady, her silence more powerful than words. The class began, and the masters barked out commands. Students moved in unison, punching and kicking with precision. The quiet woman joined the line, her movements slow at first, as though testing the rhythm. Snickers spread through the dojo as the masters watched her carefully. When it came time for sparring, the masters chose her as a partner. "Show us what you can do," one of them said, grinning with arrogance. The room went silent as she stepped onto the mat facing her opponent. Her eyes lowered humbly, her posture relaxed, as though she posed no threat at all. The master lunged forward with a quick strike, meant to intimidate. But in a blur, the woman shifted her stance and deflected the attack with effortless grace. The crowd gasped as the master stumbled back, his balance broken by her simple move. The dojo filled with whispers, the laughter now replaced by stunned silence. The woman bowed politely and returned to her stance. Her expression remained calm, as if nothing unusual had happened. The masters frowned, their pride stung by her effortless response. They circled her, eager to test her further, unaware of the storm hidden within her quiet frame. Another master stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he prepared his strike. The room fell silent, once again the students holding their breath in anticipation. He rushed at the woman with speed, his kick slicing through the air with precision. But just as his foot was about to land, she shifted her weight and swept his leg from beneath him. The master fell hard to the mat, his pride more bruised than his body. Gasps erupted from the students, their disbelief echoing across the dojo walls. The quiet woman stood firm, her breathing steady, her stance unbroken. She had moved with the ease of someone who had practiced far beyond what any of them imagined. The remaining masters looked at one another, their smirks replaced with grim determination. They could no longer dismiss her as a novice. One of them barked out, "Let us see how she handles all of us together." The students widened their eyes, shocked at the challenge. The woman nodded calmly, as though she had expected it from the start. The three black belts surrounded her, their steps measured and cautious now. They circled like predators around prey, but their eyes betrayed hesitation. The woman lowered her stance, her focus sharp, her calmness unshaken. The first master lunged again, aiming for her shoulder. She sidestepped smoothly, grabbing his wrist and twisting with controlled force, sending him sprawling. Before the second could react, she turned with lightning speed, blocking his strike and countering with a precise palm strike to his chest. He staggered back, gasping for air, unable to believe the power behind her small frame. The third hesitated, his arrogance fading as sweat formed on his brow. The students watched wide-eyed, some whispering that she moved like a seasoned warrior. The dojo that had once mocked her now held an air of awe and respect. Still, the quiet woman did not boast. She remained centered, as though this was nothing more than practice. The third master finally stepped forward, his pride forcing him into action. He launched a flurry of strikes, his fists moving fast, his kicks cutting through the air. The students leaned forward, expecting at least one of his attacks to land. But the quiet woman flowed like water, slipping past every strike, her movements smooth and precise. She caught his arm at the perfect moment, twisting it gently but firmly enough to send him crashing to the mat. The sound of his fall echoed across the dojo, leaving the room in stunned silence. The other masters scrambled to their feet, their faces red with both anger and humiliation. They could not believe what had just happened in front of their students. The woman bowed respectfully, as though she had not just humbled 3 black belts in succession. Her breathing was calm, her expression unchanged, her focus steady. The The students who had once laughed at her now stared with admiration, some even smiling with awe. Whispers spread quickly through the dojo, like fire leaping from one corner to the next. She stood silently waiting for the next command, not boasting, not celebrating. Her humility only deepened the shock of her skill. The masters exchanged uneasy glances, the arrogance they carried into the match now replaced with uncertainty. They had underestimated her, and now the entire dojo had seen the result. The masters regrouped, their voices low as they muttered among themselves. Their pride demanded they try again, but their confidence had been shaken. One of them raised his hand, signaling for silence in the dojo. He stepped forward, his face stern, yet his eyes flickered with doubt. The quiet woman adjusted her stance, waiting without a trace of fear. Her calm presence seemed to fill the entire room, pressing down on everyone who watched. The master attacked with renewed fury, striking faster than before, his fists and feet blurring with speed. But she moved as if she had already seen each strike before it came, blocking, dodging, and redirecting with flawless control. The students erupted in gasps, their disbelief growing with every exchange. They had trained under these masters for years, yet none had ever seen them pushed back so easily. The woman countered with a swift strike to the chest, followed by a sweep that sent the master tumbling to the floor. The dojo shook with the impact of his fall. The other masters hesitated, caught between anger and respect. They stepped forward together, launching a coordinated attack, hoping to overwhelm her. But the woman flowed between them, her movements seamless, her counters precise. Each time one came at her, he found himself on the mat within seconds. The students could no longer contain themselves, some cheering openly, others whispering in awe. The room that had mocked her now celebrated every strike she made. Still, the woman did not smile or boast. She simply stood ready, as though this was all routine. Her silence spoke louder than any words, humbling the masters further with every passing moment. The dojo grew hotter with tension as the masters rose to their feet once more. Their breathing was heavy, their pride torn, yet their determination unbroken. One of them wiped the sweat from his forehead, glaring at the quiet woman with disbelief. Another clenched his fists tighter, his body trembling not from fatigue, but from frustration. The woman stood unmoved, her eyes calm, her posture steady, as though nothing around her could disturb her focus. The students whispered among themselves, some unable to believe what they were witnessing. A beginner in plain clothes had outmatched the very people they considered untouchable. Respect began to replace the laughter that once filled the room. The masters circled her again, slower this time, their arrogance gone, replaced by caution. They struck with measured precision, attacking from different angles, hoping to trap her. Yet she slipped through their strikes with graceful ease, turning their power against them. Each move she made was effortless, each counter perfect. One master lunged low for her legs, but she pivoted and caught him off balance, sending him sliding across the mat. Another aimed a punch at her shoulder, but she redirected his strike, forcing him to stumble into his partner. The third charged with a desperate shout, but she stopped him with a swift block and a single sharp strike that sent him staggering back. The students gasped loudly, their voices rising in disbelief and admiration. The dojo echoed with the sound of bodies hitting the mat over and over. And through it all, the quiet woman remained centered, her breathing calm, her presence unshaken. She looked less like a student and more like a hidden master, revealing herself only when pushed. The masters rose once again, their pride refusing to let them remain on the floor. Their robes were wrinkled, their belts loosened, their breathing sharp and uneven. Yet still they circled her, unwilling to admit defeat in front of their students. The room was so silent that every step they took seemed to echo against the dojo walls. The quiet woman shifted her stance, slightly, her eyes steady, her body relaxed. It was as though she had been waiting for this very test all along. The students leaned forward, some with wide eyes, others with mouths open in awe. They had never seen anyone move with such grace and control. One master let out a sharp cry and charged, his fist aimed for her face. She tilted her head just enough for the strike to miss, then countered with a palm strike to his chest, sending him sprawling backward. Another tried to catch her from the side, but she turned smoothly, her legs sweeping across the mat and knocking him flat. The third hesitated, then rushed in with both hands ready, but she caught his wrist twisted and forced him down in a single motion. Gasps filled the room louder than before. The students were no longer whispering, they were speaking openly, their voices carrying amazement and respect. Some even clapped before quickly stopping, unsure if it was allowed. The woman stood tall in the center, her presence commanding the entire dojo. The masters looked at her not with arrogance, but with something closer to fear. Their pride was wounded, yet they could not deny what they had seen. They had underestimated her from the start, mocked her, and dismissed her. But now they faced the truth that her skill was far beyond their own. The dojo floor was still as the masters slowly picked themselves up. Their shoulders slumped, their eyes lowered, avoiding the stares of their own students. For the first time, their authority wavered like a candle struggling against the wind. The quiet woman remained in the center, unmoved, calm, as the storm around her settled. The students whispered more boldly, now their voices filled with awe. Some spoke of her speed, others of her precision, and some simply called her unstoppable. The energy in the room had shifted completely. The laughter and doubt that once surrounded her had turned into respect and admiration. Every gaze followed her, every breath. The once invisible woman now held the entire dojo in her silence. One master straightened his belt and stepped forward again. His tone was different, no longer mocking but cautious. "You are skilled," he admitted, his voice low yet carrying across the mats. The woman bowed slightly, her expression humble, as though his words meant little compared to the truth of her actions. Another master clenched his fists, frustration still burning within him. He shouted for another round, his pride unwilling to accept what had unfolded. The students gasped at his demand, but the quiet woman only nodded calmly. Her readiness unsettled him more than any display of strength ever could. The masters regrouped once more, circling with caution, their every move slower, more deliberate. The woman lowered her stance, her eyes sharp, her breathing steady. The dojo seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the clash to begin again. Every student knew they were about to witness something that would be remembered for years to come. The first master moved in carefully, this time no longer reckless with pride. His strike came fast and precise, but the quiet woman blocked with ease, turning his momentum aside. The sound of his stumble echoed as he struggled to regain his footing. Gasps rippled through the students, their eyes wide with disbelief. The second master followed, quickly aiming a powerful kick toward her side. She bent low, spinning gracefully beneath the strike before sweeping his leg from under him. He fell hard against the mat, the thud ringing through the dojo. The students erupted into murmurs, unable to hide their amazement. The third master hesitated, his pride clashing with the fear in his eyes. He charged anyway, fists flying in rapid bursts, hoping to overwhelm her. But she flowed around him like water, each movement effortless, each counter precise. One final twist of her body, and he was sent tumbling backward onto the floor. The dojo fell silent, only the sound of heavy breathing filling the air. The three masters lay on the mat, stunned, their pride shattered once again. The quiet woman straightened her posture, her face calm, her eyes unshaken. She bowed respectfully, as though the match had been nothing more than practice. The students could not contain themselves, now their whispers rising into cheers. They had seen the impossible, a simple woman standing against three masters and triumphing. Some clapped their hands, others shouted words of admiration. The dojo was alive with energy, but the woman remained still, centered and humble. The masters rose slowly, their expressions no longer filled with arrogance, but with something different. Respect mixed with disbelief as they stared at the woman they had once mocked. They exchanged glances, each knowing they had underestimated her completely. The dojo waited breathless to see what would happen next. One of the masters adjusted his belt, his breathing heavy as he faced the quiet woman again. His eyes no longer mocked her, instead they studied her with caution and a trace of humility. "You are no ordinary student," he said, his voice steady but low. The students leaned closer, hanging on every word, waiting for her reply. The woman bowed slightly, her calm expression never changing. "I came here to learn," she said softly, "not to embarrass anyone." Her words carried a quiet weight that settled over the dojo. The students exchanged glances, their admiration for her growing stronger. The second master stepped forward, his pride still wounded. His voice was sharp, though his tone lacked the confidence it once held. "If you came to learn, then show us how far your knowledge truly goes." The students gasped at his challenge, their excitement filling the room. The quiet woman gave a single nod, her stance lowering once again. The mats creaked under her feet as she readied herself. The masters circled her, but their steps were slower, more deliberate than before. They no longer saw her as weak, they saw her as an opponent worthy of their full strength. The students watched with wide eyes, the tension in the room rising. Every breath, every movement echoed like a drumbeat against the dojo walls. The quiet woman remained still, her gaze calm, her body relaxed. She was waiting for them to strike, knowing the storm would come again. The second master lunged forward, his strike sharp and fast. The quiet woman moved like lightning, her arms sweeping his attack aside as she spun and sent him to the mat. The dojo shook with the impact, and the students roared in amazement. The first master tried next, his fists flying in rapid bursts. But she slipped between his strikes, her movements precise and fluid. A single palm strike to his chest knocked him backward, his breath stolen in an instant. The third master shouted and rushed at her with all his strength. She met him head on, her block firm, her counter swift. In a blink he was on the floor, staring up at the ceiling, his pride shattered once again. The dojo erupted with cheers, the students no longer holding back their admiration. Their voices filled the air as they shouted her name with respect. The masters rose slowly, their arrogance gone, their heads bowed slightly in defeat. They looked at the quiet woman not with scorn, but with deep respect. She stood calm in the center of the mat, her breathing steady, her face serene. She bowed to them with the same humility she had carried from the beginning. In that moment, the entire dojo understood. She was not just a fighter, but a true master. A simple woman who had revealed her brilliance only when pushed. The students clapped and cheered, their respect overflowing. The masters acknowledged her with silent bows, their pride transformed into honor. And as the dojo filled with the sound of applause, the quiet woman remained still. A figure of strength and humility, her presence forever etched into their memory.